Hello everyone, welcome back to this course. In today's lecture, the objective is to implement the register and the login flow for this job portal application, the project for which we set up in our last lecture of week 7. So as you all may recall, what we did in the last session was creating a project structure that we shall be using going forward for implementing an application or a system called job portal. Now this job portal is basically a platform that is being created for multiple types of users, or you could say users having multiple types of roles. There will be a role called candidate who would come onto this platform, would post about his or her skills, would upload his or her resume, and there will be a role called recruiter, which would also visit this platform, just like other platforms like Naukri, like LinkedIn, Indeed, etc., in order to screen candidates based on the profiles or the vacancies that they have in their respective organizations. All right, so this is on the left hand side of this VS Code window layout. You could see all the project structure, the files and folders that we have created so far. Uh, Okay, I have also made a few additions to this project, since the last lecture, and a few of those changes would include things like enums.ts. So I have created this file called enums.ts here, and here I have added a bunch of enums that we will be using going forward into this project. You could take a look at what all enums I have created. User role, which is candidate and recruiter. Then we have company sector, candidate qualification, job application status. You would get to know about each and every of this enum. Why have we created it? Where we shall be using all these. And at the end, what I'm doing is I am simply exporting all these enums. So it's a good practice if you define or place all your enum definitions at a single place and you export what is required, and then you can simply import the required enums into the respective file instead of defining it at the place wherever you need it. All right, in addition to that, this is the v1 router that we have created, and this v1 router is directly linked into our index.ts file with this endpoint or this base endpoint called api slash v1. That signifies that whatever routers or routes we will implement for this router underscore v1, they will serve as the v1 or the first version of this api application. And for this v1 router, we have multiple routers available here. One is for user, one is for jobs, the other one is for application. You might not have the complete context as of now what all these routes will be doing, but in today's session we shall be taking care only of this user router. As in the beginning of this lecture I mentioned, the objective is going to implement the register and the login flow that is directly concerned with the users of this application, irrespective of what other functions that they can perform. All right, now if I shall go to this user router, here you could see it's a completely blank file as of now, and the only thing that it kind of imports is this user controller, because for every router that we have available here in the v1 folder under the routers folder, we also have respective controllers for the same. So as you can see in the controllers v1 folder, we have this job application controller, we have this job posting controller, and the user controller. So for the sake of time, what I have done is I have pasted a few function definitions here in the user controller, though this file might have a few errors, depending upon some wrong imports or probably some of the imports not being fulfilled. We shall be taking a look at that. But for now, very quickly, I would like to tell you that what all routes we shall be implementing in the today's session. So in order to do that, I shall quickly navigate to this user router file. And here in this configure function, I am going to paste these bunch of routes that we plan to implement in today's session. And as you can see, there are a total of 5 routes available here: sign up, login, request OTP, resend OTP, and verify OTP. So sign up, as you all might have guessed, that this is going to be an endpoint that we will use for registering a user into this application, no matter what the role of the user is. That means even a recruiter or a candidate will be able to utilize the same endpoint in order to get registered on this application. The same thing goes with login, or rather any other endpoint in this particular router, since this is specific to user. This is not specific to any role as of now. Okay, we are looking at the top level user point of view here. Okay. Then the second endpoint will be utilized for the login. That means once the sorry. So once the user has already registered on this platform, they will be able to utilize this login endpoint in order to get back to this platform to use what all services it offers. Then we have this request OTP endpoint. Okay, so in case someone probably does not remember the password or might not want to use his or her password, the person could simply use the request OTP option, where the person will be required to enter his or her email, and an OTP will be sent to his or her email. And that OTP is something that the user can enter in order to get access to the platform. And in order to facilitate this OTP flow, we have three such endpoints that will help us with those. One is request OTP. Second is resend OTP. In case the OTP didn't pass through, or probably the OTP was kind of expired, then you could use this. And then the verify OTP. That means when the user enters the OTP, the backend will validate that for you. So these are all the endpoints that we shall be implementing. And as you can see, we have imported this user controller here, and each of this endpoint is mapping or is being mapped to one of the functions that is defined in the user controller. So let us quickly take a look at the very first function, that is going to be user signup. Okay, so let's try to resolve any errors or warnings that we are getting here. So the only warning that I see is cannot find module repositories or its corresponding type declarations. So it says that this repositories does not exist. Okay, so this exists in utils folder and a file named repositories. Let us see if we have a file named with this one. No, we don't seem to. Yeah, we are having this repositories.ts file created here, but this file doesn't seem to be having any contents. And this is expected to export something called user repository. All right, so what we need to do is we actually need to create all the database entity repositories here that we shall be making use of on behalf of tables in order to query. So what I would do here is, firstly, I would like to import the data source, and the name of our data source is basically job portal data source. So I would come here and say job portal data source. All right. And then what would I do is, with this job portal data source, I am going to create a repository. So whenever I would be required to make any query into the users table, I shall be making use of this user repository. And how should I create a repository for this? So I would say job portal data source dot get repository. And then what I need to pass here, I will need to pass the entity. So I also need to bring the user entity here. Now, what is user entity? Let me take you to that part as well. But before that, let me just have it here. And at the end, what all things I would do is I would say export user repository. That's all. Now, once we plan to add more database entities or more repositories, depending upon how many tables we need to query, we shall be adding each of that repository here in the single file itself. So that we can keep all the repositories in a single file in a single place, and we can import it at any other file, whichever or wherever it is required. Sorry. Now, let's take a quick look at what all entities exist in an application. In the previous lecture, we have already created say 5 files, as we are working with 5 tables, so to speak, in this particular platform or application: user, recruiter detail, job posting, job application, and candidate detail. Now, if you look at 3 tables out of these 5, that is user, recruiter detail, and candidate detail, they correspond to the same entity on a logical level, that is user. So a user can either be a recruiter or a candidate. Now, depending upon the role of the user, what we plan to do is we plan to store the additional information that is role specific in a separate table. Now, let's say being a candidate, you might be required to tell us about the number of years of experience you have, the skills you have, the primary skill, the primary role that you are looking for. Similarly, while talking about recruiter, you might be expected to reveal things related to your organization name, like the roles, or probably the uh, you know the primary domain the company operates with, and particularly the generic roles that your company typically looks for. So these are some role specific information. Now we have two options or two ways to look at it. One is that we store all this information in a single table, say user itself. It's just that if you create a user of type candidate, then all the columns that correspond to the other role, that is, let's say, recruiter role, they will be kind of empty or will be left blank or null or whatever. And the vice versa as well. If you create a role or a user with role recruiter, then all the columns that correspond to the candidate role will be kind of left empty or will be set to null. So as you know that the database table itself will be kind of divided. Some rows will be having some specific values for specific columns, some might not have it. So in order to kind of make it simpler or make it more organized, what we have decided to do here is we have decided that we shall keep all the common attributes for the users. That might include their username, their email, their password, or any common information that these two roles have in common will be kept in the user entity, and anything that goes specific to their roles, that will be kept in a separate table, so that none of the column is kind of acting as a kind of what I say, a redundant column or redundant information for any given role in all the tables that we have in our data structure. Now, looking at the user entity, let's see what all columns exist in the users role. So if you look at users role, we have this ID, which is primarily generated. That means we will not be creating this ID on our own. Whenever we will create or insert a new user, the database itself will take care of the new ID for the new user. Then we have the name, which must be of type string. Then we have email, which must be unique across all the users. Yeah, for now, we have decided to keep the email unique. Uh, Now we have password. If the user wants to set the password, then we have this role. Okay, and role is set to this user role enum that we had created in the enums.ts file. So here we have only two roles available, candidate and recruiter, and this is kind of something that we are referencing in a user entity. Then we have login OTP. So if someone wants to make use of request OTP or the OTP workflow, then these two columns will be of relevance, so that we can store the OTP corresponding to a particular user along with its expiry. And then these two are the columns which are kind of metadata for a given row in a table, which is created at and updated at. So this will tell you or give you information about when this particular row was actually created and was modified. For the initial creation, both created at and updated at will correspond to the same timestamp. And at the end, we have two of these relationships that are defined with recruiter details and candidate details. So let us first take a look at what all columns or attributes exist in each of these two tables, recruiter and candidate details. So recruiter details has these many columns. Okay. So this user or user ID, you could say this is kind of going to be the foreign key with the users table. Then we have the company name. Then we have the sector. Then we have the company description and this metadata for the row that is created at and updated at. So probably only a few columns for recruiter. Whereas looking at the candidate, again, user and user ID is kind of facilitating the foreign key reference. Then for employee, we have, or for candidate, we have current sector. We have experience, in the comment, it is mentioning in months. It is kind of subjective here. You might ask for experience in years or probably in any other unit, but for now we shall go with months. Then the qualification, and qualification is also an enum here, which has these three values define graduate, postgraduate, and doctorate. Right? You can even have more values as part of this enum. Might be uh, metric or inter or whatever types of qualifications that you might want to add support for. Right. Then we have brief intro for the candidate, then the resume URL, LinkedIn URL, GitHub URL, portfolio URL, etc., etc. A few things that you might want to take a look at is that these three URLs, that is LinkedIn, GitHub, and portfolio URL, they are kind of made optional. They are kind of made nullable here. That means if you don't enter the values for these attributes or columns, database won't throw you any error. But all other columns are absolutely required. You cannot skip giving values for those. Okay. Now, if you take a look at user entity, what it is doing is it is creating a one-to-one relation with recruiter detail as well as candidate detail. So in both of these entities, we are also seeing we are using one-to-one is being mapped with user table, and we are also using this join column. Now, wherever you are using this join column, this actually becomes the owning side of a relationship. Now, since this join column is being used in the candidate detail and the recruiter detail table, that means the foreign key will exist in these two tables instead of being created in the users table. So along with all these specific columns or attributes for a specific user, each row will have an ID that will correspond to which user this information comes from. Okay, so this is how you can create relationships in TypeORM. For now, we have only created one-to-one, but going forward into this project itself, we shall be seeing some other types of relationships, particularly including one-to-many, and the other side would automatically become many-to-one. Okay, but please make sure that wherever you use join column, it automatically becomes the owning side of the relationship. And this is the place where the foreign key column gets created. All right, so these are the tables that we have. Now, what we shall do is we shall be taking a look at the controller function, and let's first try to resolve the error. It is saying cannot find module utils repositories. So maybe what I would do is I would write it again since I have something, and yeah, the error is gone. Maybe some path was wrong, or probably this was not refreshed or something, but the error has now gone. Now, looking at the very first function that we have, now what we are doing is we are writing pure logic here. That's why, in order to save the time, I have already written this logic, and we can focus on, the things that are really relevant for a developer. Okay. So what it is doing is we are simply using this request.body. Now, whenever you are using request.body, it becomes certain that you are either using a post or a put request, because a get or delete request typically does not have a request body. Like patch could also include the request.body, so that is also kind of qualified for using request.body. But typically we use put and post request. Of course, we can use patch as well in case of partial updates. So remember, this is user sign up. Now, user sign up could be for any type of role, right? Now, you might be wondering that if this is for sign up, then we are missing a lot of information. Like for candidate, we are missing the number of years of experience, the portfolio, the skills that the candidate have. Similarly, the specific attributes that a recruiter should be submitting at the time of registering. Where are all those attributes? So for now, what we are trying to validate is that whether the request that has come to the server, to this backend server, is even qualified enough to move to the next level of validation. For now, we are just looking at the very basic information that a user requires. So a user requires name, email, password, and role, right? Now we are checking whether this user role that has come into this request is a valid role or not. And then at the end, we are also checking if the email that is being sent as part of this request, is this something that already exists in the system? If it is so, then simply reject this request by giving this error called user with this email already exists. All right. Now, if the user does not exist, that means request seems to be genuine at this point of time. Now, what we do is we basically compute a hashed password based on the password what was provided in the request body with the help of pcrypt. And now we check that what was the role that was provided in the request body. If the role is the recruiter role, now comes the time when we actually parse this body in order to look for the recruiter specific information, and those includes company name, sector, and the company description. And if any of the mandatory information is skipped, we simply reject this request saying the fields are not provided or all the fields are not provided. Whereas if all the fields were provided, then what we do is we make use of this save function with the help of repository method, and we provide name, email, password, role, and we also provide this relationship detail, recruiter details, where we are providing company name, sector, and the company description. Similarly, for a candidate role, these many are the mandatory things which the candidate at least must submit, whereas these three are the optional. But we are also looking for that in case the request contains those. And but when it comes to validation, we only check till resume URL. We didn't look for LinkedIn URL, GitHub URL, portfolio URL. Okay. And when we create this new user object, then what we simply do is we add all the details that we got in the request body, and we end up creating a new user. And at the end, what we send back to the user is a success message saying that the request was fulfilled, uh, and some basic details for the user. For example, the ID that was created for the user by the database, the name for the user, email, and then the role, that what role this user is actually saved into our system. Okay. Similarly, looking at some other functions quickly, and post that we shall be seeing a quick demo for all these things. Now, user login via password. Firstly, we check if the email and password was provided. If any of these details are missing, we cannot entertain this request. So reject this request. After that, we check if the user even exists or not. If the user does not exist, then you need to reject the request. Then you need to check whether the password is valid, and we are doing it with the help of bcrypt.compare here. And if the password is not valid, we reject this request. Otherwise, we say that the request is fulfilled. Yeah, so this was all about user logging via password. Now, when it comes to request OTP, all we look for in the request OTP request is basically the email. And we check if the user does not exist with this particular email, then we will not entertain this request because the user at least needs to register. You cannot directly sign in or register with just an OTP, because in that case you might be missing out information related to your role, like the mandatory information. And in case the request passes all the validations, what we do is we simply run this random OTP generation logic to generate an OTP of 6 digits. And what we do is in the database, the users table, we add this OTP corresponding to the user whoever requested this OTP, along with login OTP expiry. And here we have said that the login OTP expiry is new date itself. Definitely, it is not the correct thing. So what should we generally do is we should allow a time of, say, 5 to 10 minutes. So if we want to allow a time of 5 to 10 minutes, I could say 5 minutes have 60 seconds, and each second has, kind of, 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so this is giving us an error. Let us take a look at it. It is saying operator plus cannot be applied to type, state, and number. All right. So we are trying to make it something else. Maybe what I would do is I would say date dot now, and here I am going to add this time. So now it says that construct a date from the current time by adding 5 minutes to it, right? And then what we can do is, okay, so this is a template that must exist in the HTML templates folder. So HTML templates folder does not seem to be having anything. So maybe we can create something. And the name of the file is request OTP. So request OTP, or rather I would say just OTP.html, because we don't have a lot of type of HTML templates. Here, all this, and then let me see what all things it is requiring for in the template. So it requires this variable to exist. Now forget about HTML template being hydrated with Jinja 2 and all. What we are doing is we are simply using string functions here, and simply parsing this entire HTML template as a file, as a file having string characters. And then we are looking for something this name being enclosed in two curly brackets, and we are replacing it with the username. Same goes with OTP and the context. So what I'm going to do is I have already created a basic template, and here I would say uh, job portal, just a title, and here I would say hi, whatever the username would be, uh, your OTP to context. Now, whatever the context would be, it could be for logging in, it could be for probably deleting your profile that we might have a functionality for in the coming future, or anything else. Your OTP to, let's say, complete your login process is OTP. Now, these are the three variables: name, context, and OTP that are being hydrated from the user controller: name, OTP, and context. Yep. So that's all. And once this is done, what we are going to do is we are going to send this, with the help of a transporter that was created using NodeMailer. Now, for the what I say, for the demo purposes, I am not going to demonstrate this functionality as of now. Maybe we could see how does this actually work in one of the live sessions, as I don't have an application password generated for any of the Google mails right now. But probably in one of the live sessions, I would be able to show you that how you could create an application password and can successfully set up NodeMailer. In case you want to use Google services to send a limited number of emails in a day. Let's say if you want to send 100, 200, 300 emails, that should be perfectly fine. But if you are looking at sending bulk emails in a day, then you should definitely look for a transaction provider, an email transaction provider, because Google services actually come with a limit. You will be able to send only so many number of emails in a day. All right. And yeah, once this is done, so for now, what I would do is I would go to the send email function, and I would just comment this out, right? For the sake of simplicity, I am not making this demo too much complex in the very beginning. Okay. Now, resend OTP is going to be something that is very similar to, request OTP. The only additional validation that we will have here is this: that if the previous OTP has not yet expired, in that case, we will reject this request saying, or OTP has already been sent and it was not expired. So you better wait for the OTP to get expired, right? And the same things, the same, exact logic is being used here in the resend OTP as well. Whereas in verify OTP, what we do is we validate whether the OTP that has come in the request. So we check email and OTP in the request body, and then at the end we are checking that if this OTP is not equals to what exists in the database, then this is an invalid OTP. Or if the OTP has already been expired, then you will have to request the OTP once again and then enter it. And once you have verified the OTP, you make sure that the same OTP should not be used again by the user. So you automatically nullify the OTP and its expiry column as well, right? And at the end, you say, yeah, all right, you should get access to your dashboard or whatever, or wherever you would want to utilize this endpoint that is verified. All right, so this is done. This was all simple logic. There was no rocket science that we have used as of now here. Now, what we need to do is we need to actually create this database. So if we can recall from our last, probably few last sessions, the only database that exists is Task Manager. So this is something that we created for demonstrating the Task Manager application. Now we have a different database. So the credentials for the database are already available here in our environment files. And if you can take a look at all the configurations available here, we also have JWT secret that we will be learning about in the next lecture. And then we also have this email and email password. This is something that we have used in the mail transporter in order to set it up so that we can set up the node builder. Now, once we will have the the application password for one of the Google email, then we should be able to use it here. We don't need to make any change. All we need to do is simply replace email and password with the actual values. Rest everything will work fine. Okay. The Database credentials are already configured and I'm hoping these are all right. Only thing we need to change is basically this Postgres database. So maybe I would change it to job portal. And for that, what I would do is I would first connect to this database. We only have task table, which only had one row. And what I would do is I would create a new database, create database called job portal. Okay, a new database now was created. And what I would do here is I would duplicate it. And here I would say job portal. I would test this connection. It says, okay, we need to provide the password and all. Password was not provided here. What is the password, by the way? It's abhi@123. Now, since this is a database that is running in my local machine, I'm not really concerned about the security as of now. Sorry, I typed it at the wrong place. Postgres is the username. Yeah, should work fine. Yep, it is working. Now we need to wait for any tables because this database will not have any tables as of now. And in order to create tables, what we are going to do is we are going to navigate to each of our entity, that is user entity here. We have made synchronize true here. Recruiter detail, we have made synchronize true. Job posting does not exist. Application does not exist. Candidate detail, we have made synchronize true here. And at the end, I would go to my data source and see if my synchronize is true. Yes, it is true here. So as soon as I will run my application, I should see my database, getting populated with the required tables. And how do I run my application? I should go to package.json and I should say npm run dev. So if I say npm run dev, so here it is saying server is running. Why is it printing the password here? Okay, this is printing password because we have added a console.log statement here. Let me remove that. I'm sorry. Okay, so if I refresh this, then you could see we are able to see three tables here. Users having required columns, then recruiter details and candidate details. Now, once we have created these tables, please make sure that you, that you don't keep the synchronize option true, at least in the production environment. Please don't. Okay. And post that, it's also a good practice if you know, convert all synchronize true to synchronize false in every entity definition, probably by doing a global search and replace all feature of any ID that is available in today's time will provide you with this feature. And simply go here and can type synchronize true. And here you could type what you want to replace this statement with and click on replace all, everything will be done. Okay, fine. So we have done this. Now, what we need to do is we need to test whether the endpoints that we have created, they are working or not. And in order to find out whether they work or not, or to resolve any errors that these endpoints might throw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first find out what is going to be the route for each of the endpoint. So the very first the base endpoint is going to be API v1. And after API v1, we shall navigate to v1 router and user. So API v1 user is the base path. Now going into user router, the final endpoints are sign up, login, request OTP, resend OTP, and verify OTP. All right. So in order to test all these endpoints, I am going to be using this Postman here, right? For now, I have not logged in to this application, but that's okay. It's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a post request where the server URL is going to be localhost 8080. Localhost 8080. The base path is /API /v1. Then we have /user. Then we have sign up. Then we have this sign up here. Okay, so we're getting this error cannot destructure property name of request.body. So the request.body itself is not available here, seems like request.body is not available. So everything originates from index.ts. We have applied this express.json middleware here. This server.init is basically a async function. This is okay. So maybe we should await this. And okay, let me make it async. And if I refresh this, I hope the application should be refreshed by now. Yes. And if I hit it again, okay, now let us try to give this request the required payload, that is name, email, password, and role. So let me quickly. Okay, now let's try to give this request the required payload, which will have name. Let's say name can be Dinesh. Email, say email can be uh, Dinesh123 at the rate gmail.com. Then we may name, email, then we may have role. Then role can be equal to uh, say, okay, let's take the role to be candidate here. Uh, yep, let me come here. So let's say it is candidate. And what else? Name, email, role. Is there anything else that we need? Hmm, okay, name, email, role, and password. All right. So password. Let's keep it like Dinesh123. And in that case, if I click on send, then it is saying all fields are required because what we have done is we have provided the name or even the role to be candidate, but we have not provided any required details. So candidate requires a bunch of properties to be given. So just for the demo purposes, what I would do is I would quickly take okay, where do I have enums? We will take a recruiter here. I would take a recruiter and I would take the properties that our recruiter would require as mandatory things: company name, sector, and company description. Okay, and looking at the entity, okay, sector is also something that we need to take. Okay, company sector. Okay, I'll give it to be IT just to be simple. So, company name is the very first thing we should take. So, company name, let's say, Dinesh Private Limited, anything. And then we have sector. Sector, I would give IT. And the last thing that we would need is company description. So, company description, I would say this is a sample description. And these were all the required attributes that we must provide for the sign up endpoint in case a user is being registered with the role of recruiter. And the moment I'll hit the send button here, and let's see what happens. Okay, so the response we received was that the user was created successfully. The ID was given it. The ID was given to be six. The name, the email, and the role of the user that was recently registered. If we come back to the database and refresh, so you could see that there is one row that has now been created in the users table. And if we go to recruiter details, we didn't find any rows created here. Well, but what we did in user sign up is that along with creating a user, we are also trying to add a record in the respective role details table, be it a recruiter or a candidate. But somehow these details are not getting ingested into the uh, one-to-one relationship tables. So let's see what is the issue or how can we resolve it. So coming on to user entity, we see that one-to-one is actually being used here in order to establish the relationship. Okay, recruiter details. All right, maybe, yeah. So we are actually missing out on the cascade operations or the cascade option here while defining the relationship. So while defining the relationship, we can specify which all cascade operations we would want to perform on this particular entity called or this attribute called recruiter details when used with user entity. So we could provide an extra set of options as the third argument to this callback function that we are providing. Not the callback function, basically this one-to-one decorator. And here we could specify cascade. We could specify a number of options individually if you want to perform, let's say, insert, update. But for now, I would say all, and I would simply say cascade true. The same thing maybe I should do for candidate details as well, because the same relationship is being established with the candidate details, just like recruiter details. So I would say cascade true here. And now I should see my server should have been restarted. Yes, it is. And if I come back here and click on send once again, so it says user with this email is already registered. Yeah, that's true. So maybe I'll just remove 4 from the email. I'll add Dinesh1 in the name, and I would leave everything as it is. And I'll click on the send button once again. And this time we see that a new user has been created with these many details. And now if I come back to the database table, currently I'm on recruiter details, and you can see this time a row has now been added in the recruiter details. The same should have been added in the users table as well. Yes, that's true. So we can see 2 users with the almost same name, Dinesh and Dinesh1, with the some email ID and some password that has been encrypted using bcrypt, and both of those users have the role recruiter. Yeah, and that's all. So this is how the sign up endpoint is working. So now the next thing is going to be the login endpoint. So in login endpoint, we don't require these many details, but it doesn't really matter in case we provide these many details in the request body, because these are certainly being ignored in case they are not required in the request. So what is required in login? It is the email and the password field. And we are correctly providing the email and password field. Let's click on send and see what happens. So the moment we do that, it says user logged in successfully. That means the password and the username or the email that we provided, they all were correct. But let us try to see what happens in case the password doesn't match. Let me remove the 4 from the password attribute and click on send. In that case, it is invalid password. I'll come back and add the 4 that I removed previously, and then click on send again, and this time again we are able to see that the request was successful. It went through completely. All right, so this is how the sign up and login is going to work. Well, you might be thinking that what is the benefit of this sign up and login, especially the login endpoint, because whenever someone is requesting or hitting this endpoint, all we are getting is whether the password or something is true or not. But what is the use case of this endpoint in action? So whenever you are working on web applications, let's say you ask for username and password. Now, once the username and password is validated, would you allow the user to perform any authoritative operations where the user must be authenticated in order to perform those operations, then how would you validate those operations? Would you be performing this password validation in each and every request, or in every operation implementation that you will be coding in the backend? No. Generally, what happens is in the sign up and the login endpoint specifically, we are going to sign a token in the backend, and with the successful response that we are getting, or getting to see here, wherever the success is being returned as true, we are going to be sending that token to the client, along with all these successful messages. And it will be the client's responsibility to save that token somehow and send that token in all the subsequent requests that require uh, user to verify his or her identity. So the backend is going to use that token to validate and to authenticate whether the client is authorized to perform certain operation, or is authorized to get the information that the client is requesting for. Okay, so this is the actual use case for these login and sign up endpoints that we have created. But currently we are not returning any token as such, because this is something that we will have a dedicated lecture on. In fact, this is going to be the very next lecture, and we shall see how we can sign JWT tokens and can return it back to the client. And the client is responsible for sending those tokens in the subsequent request in order to validate or authenticate the client's request or identity. Now, sign up and login endpoints are done. The next endpoint was request OTP. And in request OTP, all we were asking for was the email. And the email already exists here. So the only thing I would do is I would click on send button. And once I do send, though we have commented out the code for node mailer, that means no actual email will be sent on this email. And even we would have configured that node mailer with the correct credentials, the email would have been landed into someone's else Gmail account, which we don't have access to, or probably this email won't even exist. We don't really know about that. So just for the demo purposes, what we are going to do is we are going to look into the database table and see if the OTP has now been generated or not. So if I refresh this, I can see that a new OTP has now been generated. A random 6-digit OTP has now been generated. And what happens if I try to send this request once again? Well, nothing is really going to happen. It is simply going to override the existing OTP. So currently it is 960232. If I hit it again, this should change. So this time it became 850160. All right. So request OTP is simply going to override the any existing OTP in case it has. And what happens if I try to hit resend OTP, which is being used in order to request another OTP in case the previous OTP got expired, or you didn't receive the OTP, or things like that, or scenarios like that. If I click on send button here, it says OTP has already been sent, because we have put a validation in the backend that if the OTP that currently exists for that particular user has not expired, in that case, no new OTP will be issued in case of resend OTP. But that can still happen with the help of request OTP. So if one wants to put a validation or a similar validation in the request OTP as well, you could do that too. Right? Nothing is preventing you from doing that. But the last endpoint is going to be the verify OTP, which is going to validate whether the OTP you have provided is correct or not. And if I click on send button here, it says all fields are required because we have not provided the OTP field. So let me provide the OTP field here. And I don't know what the OTP is. I'm going to provide any random OTP and see what happens. So if I'm going to provide a random OTP, it says invalid OTP. Now let me take a look at the correct OTP. It is 850160. I'll simply copy it from here and I will paste it. The moment I'll hit the send button, you would see that I have gotten in this message, user logged in successfully. That means the OTP validation was successful on the backend. And even in this case as well, the backend should be signing a token and should be sending it back in the response body, so that client can save it and send it further in the subsequent request to validate its identity. And now, if I come back to backend and refresh this, Now, this OTP should go away because once an OTP has been validated, it should not be used in any way by the same user. So if I refresh this, you would see that the login OTP as well as the login OTP expiry should go away. Right? Once an OTP is used, it can not be reused. Once again. So these were all the endpoints: sign up, login, request OTP, resend OTP, and verify OTP. So these were the endpoints or functionalities that were related to the registration and the login flow for any type of user on this job portal platform or application. So this was all I wanted to cover in the today's lecture. In the next session, as I already told you, we are going to be touching upon a very important aspect of web application security, that is going to be JWT authentication. So we shall be seeing that how you can sign a JWT token on the backend and send it in the response back to the client, and then how the client is going to validate its identity, in request, which actually mandates the client, to validate, its identity, so that the backend can find out whether the client is authorized to perform certain operation, or the client is authorized in order to get certain information which is probably confidential in nature. So all these things we will see in the next lecture, and so that's all for today, and thanks for watching.